The Black Sheep Pays for Everything Part 4. Chapter 20, No Answer. After the phone call ended, there was a strange, lingering stillness in Lila's apartment, a heavy kind of quiet that didn't come from silence, but from finality. She stood for a long while, towel still wrapped around her, phone cooling in her hand, her heart beating at a pace that didn't feel like fear or panic, but something slower. Deeper. Like the slow exhale after a very long breath held too tight, for too long. And then the messages began. The first came just before midnight. A text from her mother. "Mom, I don't understand why you're doing this. Can we please talk?" She stared at it, read it twice. Then tapped delete without replying. 5 minutes later, "Mom, this isn't you. You're not like this. We've always been able to talk." Delete. Then came Harper. "Harper, Mom's crying. Are you really okay with that?" Lila read it. Noticed the weaponized guilt packed into so few words. Then deleted that one too. Her father's message arrived at 6:04 a.m. the next morning, as if he believed she might be more reasonable with sunrise. "Dad, you don't have to shut us out like this. We're family. You could at least respond." Delete. She responded in the only way she still could. With her silence. They didn't understand what her silence meant. They thought it was punishment. They thought it was bitterness. They thought she was throwing a fit. Acting dramatic. Trying to make a point. But Lila wasn't performing anything. She was finally at peace. And peace, she had learned, isn't loud. It doesn't beg to be understood. It doesn't demand acknowledgement. It just is. The messages kept coming. Not constantly. Not all at once. Just often enough to remind her that they had noticed her absence, not because they missed her laughter, or her mind, or her dreams, but because the system was broken without her. "Mom, I know you're reading these. Mason, so I guess this is it then. Harper, if you're so into boundaries now, maybe you should learn how to communicate them instead of ghosting people. Dad, I don't know who got into your head, but you need to come home and talk to us." She did read them. Every single one. She let the words land, like raindrops on a closed window. Let them slide off. Fade. And then she hit delete. One after another. No reply. No drama. No defense. Just space. The silence wasn't just between her and them anymore. It had become a practice. Lila no longer rushed to fill quiet moments with apology or over-explanation. She didn't reach for justifications. She didn't try to make it okay. Because it was already okay. She had said no. And survived it. And in that survival, she found something she never knew she'd been starving for. Sovereignty. One afternoon, she sat on the balcony with her journal in her lap and a cup of tea in her hand. The sun warmed her bare legs, the pages fluttered slightly in the breeze, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel the phantom weight of someone else's emergency pressing down on her. She opened a new page, took a deep breath, and wrote in bold, steady letters. "I am not cruel for choosing myself. I am not broken for going silent. I am not responsible for their discomfort with my boundaries." Then she closed the journal and watched the clouds drift past. Her phone buzzed once on the table. She didn't check it. She didn't need to. She already knew the pattern. Already knew the pleas wrapped in guilt, the half-hearted apologies tangled with accusations, the manufactured concern that always came laced with expectation. She didn't need to open the message to know it was another attempt to pull her back in. And she didn't need to answer it to prove she had moved on. Instead, she slid the phone across the table, leaned back in her chair, and let the sun rest on her face. The world didn't collapse. No one screamed. And nothing inside her ached. Not anymore. Chapter 21, Guilt Traps. It came at dusk, the hour when everything feels a little softer, a little more tender. The sun was low, casting long shadows across Lila's living room floor. She had just finished folding a blanket over the back of her couch when her phone lit up. Harper. Calling. Not texting. Not voice memo. Not a passive-aggressive emoji or meme. A call. Lila stared at the screen. She didn't feel the usual spike of anxiety this time. No panic, no need to defend herself or script the perfect reply in her head before answering. She was simply still. She picked up. Hello. There was a pause, like Harper had been expecting voicemail. Oh, Harper said, her voice surprised. You answered. I did. Another pause. Look, Harper began, tone already preloaded with tension, I'm not calling to fight. Okay. I'm just, Mom's really upset. Lila said nothing. She's crying all the time now. She barely sleeps. She keeps checking her phone. It's like she's just waiting for you to come back. Lila let the words hang in the air. Harper always opened like this, emotion first, sympathy-laced, carefully calculated to stir response. But Lila didn't react. She waited. Harper filled the silence, her voice low and rehearsed. She says she doesn't know what she did to deserve this. That she never meant to hurt you. That you're breaking the family. Lila's breath stayed even. She's been saying, Harper continued, that she doesn't even know you anymore. That you've changed. And, honestly, she's not wrong. That did it. Lila's mouth twitched. Not in anger, not anymore, but in a quiet sort of knowing. I have changed, she said. Harper went quiet. Lila continued, voice steady. And if Mom is crying now, every day, wondering what she did wrong, pacing the house, checking her phone, good. That used to be me. Harper didn't speak. I used to cry in silence because no one saw what I was carrying. I used to wake up with a pit in my stomach, knowing someone would need something and no one would ask if I was okay. I used to lie awake at night replaying every request I said yes to because I was too afraid to say no. I used to think love meant being needed, not being known. Still, Harper said nothing. Lila could hear her breathing on the other end, the sharp, careful inhale of someone who hadn't expected honesty. You're saying she deserves this? Harper finally asked. I'm saying, Lila replied, that she finally feels a fraction of what she let me live with for years. She's our mom. She's also a person who never asked how I was while I paid for her comfort, Lila said. Harper's voice turned brittle. You always make everything so black and white. No, Lila said gently. I make things clear. There's a difference. There was a long silence. The kind that only comes when something has been broken in the middle of a conversation and both people know it can't be put back together the same way. Finally, Harper said, so that's it. You're just going to stay gone. I'm not gone, Lila said. I'm free. Harper scoffed. Free? From what? Us. Lila didn't flinch. From being used. from being the one who holds up the family while everyone else gets to fall apart. She could feel Harper bristling, the sharpness in her inhale, the disbelief in her silence. But Lila no longer needed her sister's agreement, or permission, or validation. She had lived too long inside a guilt machine, and now she had stepped out, clean, quiet, clear-eyed. Harper's voice softened again. You know she's not the same without you. Neither am I. And that, finally, ended it. Lila waited one more beat, then said, I hope she finds peace. I hope you all do. But I'm not coming back to fix what I didn't break. She ended the call before Harper could respond. She placed the phone face down and returned to the couch. Her tea was still warm. The last light of evening stretched across the room like a gentle ribbon. And for the first time, her heart didn't twist after a family conversation. There was no guilt. No shame. No pit in her stomach. Only peace. Because now, when the guilt traps were set, Lila no longer walked into them. She saw the wires. And she stepped around them, silent and whole. Chapter 22, Rewriting the Script. The therapy office smelled like lavender and paper. Not the spa kind of lavender, this was faint, natural, grounding. The kind that didn't overwhelm but lingered softly, as if it was there to say, you're safe here. The walls were pale sage, the light warm and dappled through linen curtains. A round clock ticked in the background. There were no family photos. No degrees prominently displayed. Just the calm, steady presence of a woman in her 50s with kind, intelligent eyes and a notebook she rarely wrote in. Her name was Mara. And from the very first session, she did something Lila wasn't used to. She waited. No rushed questions. No timeline. No hurry to fix. Just space. And in that space, Lila began to unfold. I think she said in the second session, voice barely above a whisper, that I was trained to be selfless in the same way someone's trained to play dead. Mara didn't interrupt. She nodded once, then asked, what does playing dead protect you from? Lila blinked. The words formed before she had time to weigh them. Disappointment. Rejection. Being called difficult. More silence. Then, finally, and who were you protecting? Lila stared down at her hands. Everyone else. Week by week, the words came faster. The grief. The rage. The shame. But also, the truths she had buried under layers of politeness and guilt. Like how she'd felt invisible growing up. How praise for her brothers came freely, while her accomplishments earned a distracted, that's just Lila, she's always on top of things. How being responsible became a prison cell dressed up as a compliment. How no one had ever asked if she wanted to carry the weight they gave her, they just dropped it, and called her generous when she didn't complain. And the hardest truth of all. How she had confused being needed with being loved. Mara suggested writing. Not for anyone else. Just for herself. A place where your story belongs to you, she'd said. Not them. So Lila dusted off her old laptop and opened a blank document. The screen glared back at her, empty and waiting. She typed 2 words at the top, the invisible pillar. It started as a journal entry. A letter to no one. A recounting of a childhood defined not by trauma in the traditional sense, but by the quiet erosion of selfhood through endless obligation. She wrote about the time she got into Ridgewater. About the catering bill for Mason's job celebration. About the $2,200 tax payment she made from her emergency fund. About how no one had ever said thank you. She wrote through tears she didn't expect, not because the memories hurt, but because she finally gave herself permission to say, that wasn't okay. And once the words started, they didn't stop. A week later, she signed up for a free blog. No photos. No real name. No comments section. Just a blank canvas and her voice. She posted her first entry, on being useful and not loved. Within hours, someone messaged her through the anonymous contact form. I thought I was the only one. Thank you. Another the next day. I cried reading this. I've never seen someone explain what it felt like to be the strong one so clearly. Then dozens more. People who had never met her. Never asked her for a dime. People who didn't want to take, just to say, I see you. Lila felt something shift inside her. Not validation, something deeper. Recognition. For the first time in her life, her words weren't just useful, they were witnessed. She wasn't a tool. She was a voice. She wrote in the mornings now, before work, coffee beside her, curtains open to the rising sun. A quiet hour that belonged to no one but her. She wasn't just processing. She was rewriting. Not the facts. Not the timeline. But the meaning. She stopped referring to herself as the one who held the family together. She started calling herself what she truly was. A survivor of emotional erosion. A reclaimer of lost space. A builder of self. One morning, she wrote this. I used to think peace was something you earned after you'd given enough of yourself away. But peace isn't a prize. It's a right. And I'm done apologizing for finally claiming it. She posted it. Closed her laptop. Sat back. And smiled. Not a performance. Not a mask. A real, honest smile. Because this version of Lila, wasn't invisible. And she wasn't holding anyone else up. She was standing on her own. Chapter 23, The Public Fall. Lila hadn't thought about Mason in weeks. That was part of the quiet miracle of her new life, the freedom to live outside the orbit of someone else's chaos. Her days were full now, therapy sessions, morning writing rituals, long walks, the occasional coffee shop visit where she could journal in peace. She no longer held her breath when checking her phone. So when the name Mason Martin began trending on local Twitter, she didn't notice. Not right away. It was a co-worker who said something first. Hey, isn't your brother Mason Martin? Lila blinked. Why? Her co-worker turned her phone screen around. The headline made Lila's blood go still. Former tech startup consultant accused of fraud by ex-partner, lawsuit alleges embezzlement and fabricated credentials. There was Mason, front and center, the same smug headshot he used on his LinkedIn profile. Only this time, it was watermarked across a news blog with 200,000 followers. Lila didn't speak. She clicked the article. The story unfolded with clinical brutality. Mason had taken investment money from a boutique tech startup, run by an old college friend, promising to scale operations and optimize back-end logistics. The friend claimed Mason falsified project reports, padded budgets, and misrepresented his credentials. Worst of all, he allegedly diverted company funds into a personal account for consulting fees no one approved. The friend, now the plaintiff, filed a civil lawsuit for fraud, breach of contract, and misappropriation of funds totaling nearly $45,000. Lila scrolled in stunned silence. There were screenshots, invoices, emails. One leaked message read, "My sister always said I had to fake it till I made it. So that's what I'm doing." Lila stared at the line. She had never said that. But Mason, as always, was comfortable bending reality to fit his own narrative, even if it meant dragging her into it. By noon, the story was everywhere. Tech Twitter was relentless. Reddit picked it up. A TikTok user with 1.3 million followers made a messy timeline breakdown. Even Instagram gossip pages reposted Mason's smug selfies next to the phrase "CEO of nothing." The comments were vicious. "This dude really scammed with a Canva resume. Imagine trusting a guy who still calls himself a visionary. Bro's only skill is lying in business casual." Lila didn't flinch. She read every word. Every call out. Every exposed receipt. And all she felt was clarity. That evening, her mother called. Lila let it go to voicemail. Then Harper texted. "Harper, please call Mom. She's panicking." Says reporters left a voicemail on the house line. Lila didn't respond. Then a message from Mason himself. "Mason, I know you've seen the stories. I need your help. Please don't let them destroy me. I'm getting destroyed out here." Lila read it once. Then hit delete. The next day, it escalated. Someone leaked a college transcript showing Mason hadn't graduated. A journalist posted a thread of his past job titles, nearly all of which were exaggerated or unverifiable. Former co-workers came forward. He never showed up on time. He used buzzwords and blamed others. He called me emotional when I asked for project updates. Even the old party photos resurfaced, bottles in hand, shirt half buttoned, that forced charisma now twisted into arrogance. The Martin family name, once spoken with vague middle-class respect in their neighborhood, was now synonymous with entitlement. Neighbors whispered. Their parents stopped going to church. One of Harper's friends messaged her and asked, bluntly, "Is it true your brother stole startup money?" Her mother texted Lila again that night. "Mom, Mason needs support right now. He's spiraling. Please, Lila. We have to show him we're still here for him. The world's turning on him." Lila sat in bed, blanket around her shoulders, tea cooling in her hands. And she thought, how many times did I spiral while no one checked in on me? She had been invisible in her suffering. Now Mason was exposed in his downfall. And her family's only instinct was to protect the golden child. Again. They weren't panicking about ethics, or morality, or the people Mason hurt. They were panicking about how it looked. Later that week, Lila wrote a new blog post. It was titled, "When the Golden Child Falls." She didn't use names. She didn't have to. It began. "They taught me to stay quiet when I was hurting. They taught him that if he was loud enough, someone else would clean up the mess. I bled in silence. He roared in comfort. Now he is crumbling, and they finally want my voice. But I've learned that silence can be a boundary, too." She posted it. Went to bed. And slept through the night. Unbothered. Undisturbed. Free. Chapter 24, Power Reclaimed. The message came on a Wednesday morning. It was tucked between her usual flood of newsletters, reader replies, and spam offers for virtual therapy platforms and digital planners. The subject line read: Microphone interview request, we love the invisible pillar. Lila nearly deleted it without opening. But something about the sender's name caught her eye, the Unspoken podcast. She had listened to them once, a thoughtful series where people told stories of family estrangement, emotional labor, and what it meant to live an untangled life. She opened the message. Hi Lila, or Invisible Pillar, if you prefer. We've been following your blog for the past month. Several of your recent posts, especially the cost of being reliable and when the golden child falls, really struck a chord with our listeners and community. We'd love to invite you on the podcast to share your story, anonymously or openly, totally your choice. You don't need to be a professional speaker. Just honest. We think a lot of people would benefit from hearing your voice. Warmly. Serena, host/producer, The Unspoken. Lila read the message twice. Then a third time. And her first thought was not pride or excitement. It was, is it safe to be heard? She brought it up at therapy. Mara leaned back, thoughtful. What does your gut say? Lila twirled her tea in its paper cup. It says, maybe. Not yes. It's not a no, either. Then maybe. Mara smiled, is a door waiting for you to try the handle? Lila emailed Serena that night. She used her real name, for the first time, not Invisible Pillar. Hi Serena, yes. I'm interested. I think it's time to speak out loud. Thank you for seeing me. Lila. The interview was scheduled for the following week, remote, audio only, edited before airing. Serena was kind and easy, with the kind of voice that made you forget the microphone was even on. They talked for over an hour. Lila spoke slowly at first. But the words came easier than she expected. Her voice trembled at times, but it held steady, like a bridge built stronger with each truth she crossed. She spoke of growing up in a house where being useful was a requirement for affection. Of watching Mason fail upward while she succeeded in silence. Of carrying financial burdens so seamlessly that no one noticed they existed. Of asking for help once, just once, and being called selfish. Of going no contact not out of spite, but out of survival. And finally, of writing. Of finding a community of strangers who saw her more clearly than her own family ever had. When the interview ended, Serena said gently, you just gave language to things people spend a lifetime trying to name. Lila blinked tears from her eyes. Not because it hurt. But because she felt witnessed. The episode aired 2 weeks later, titled, The Pillar Who Walked Away. Within a day, it had 40,000 downloads. By the weekend, it was featured on Apple's New and Noteworthy. The messages flooded in. I listened to your story in my car and cried. You said everything I've never been able to. Thank you for showing that survival doesn't have to mean silence. Your words helped me set my first boundary with my mom. I've been scared for years. Lila read every message. Some were from women in their 60s, estranged from children who blamed them for everything. Some were from queer kids rejected by religious families. Some were from quiet middle children, like her, who had always carried what no one wanted to admit existed. Each message was a thread. And Lila was no longer unraveling, she was weaving. Her blog subscribers tripled. An online publication reached out for a feature. A well-known therapist reposted one of her quotes. Peace is not earned through exhaustion. It's claimed through truth. She printed it out and pinned it to her fridge. But more than the attention, what grounded Lila was this. She had taken her story back. Not just from her family, but from shame. From obligation. From the ghost of her old self who still flinched every time she heard her name in a guilt-laced tone. Now, her voice wasn't a whispered plea. It was a beacon. One afternoon, she sat in her favorite cafe, headphones in, re-listening to the episode. She watched people pass outside the window, people who would never know the version of her who once felt invisible. And that was okay. Because the world she was building now didn't require her to be small to be accepted. She finished her tea, closed her laptop, and smiled. She wasn't just surviving. She was thriving. On her own terms. And for the first time, the weight she had always carried. It stayed down. Because she no longer carried anyone who refused to walk beside her. Chapter 25, Full Circle. It was late spring when the message came. The kind of day where the sky was impossibly blue and the air smelled of possibility. Lila was sitting on the floor of her apartment, surrounded by pots of fresh soil, repotting the herbs she'd begun to grow on her windowsill, basil, thyme, and a stubborn little mint she wasn't sure would survive. Her phone buzzed twice, then went still. She didn't check it right away. These days, she never rushed. She took her time washing her hands, trimming the dead leaves, and wiping the counter clean. She made herself a glass of lemon water and let the quiet hum of her apartment settle back around her like a familiar blanket. Then, calmly, she picked up her phone. One message. From a number she hadn't heard from in months. Her father. Dad, Lila, I don't know if you'll even read this. But I just want to say it plainly. We were wrong. About everything. About how much you were doing. About how we took advantage of your silence. About calling you selfish. We get it now. Things have been hard without you. More than hard. Please, come back. Not just to help. Not to fix anything. Just to be with us again. We miss you. Love, Dad. Lila stared at the screen, her thumb hovering for a moment. She didn't feel anger. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. Instead, she felt still. It wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't vindication. It was simply the clarity that she had arrived, not at their doorstep, but at her own center. The version of her who would have dropped everything for those words. She didn't live here anymore. The apology came too late. Not because it wasn't needed. Not because it wasn't sincere. But because Lila no longer needed it. Forgiveness had already happened, in the private places where she rebuilt herself. When she let herself rest. When she stopped answering out of guilt. When she wrote her truth and let others find their own strength in it. When she chose herself without asking permission. She read the message again. She believed him. She really did. Her father had never been cruel, just willfully blind. Her mother had loved Lila in the way she loved flowers, pretty when quiet, useful when blooming, ignored when wilting. Harper had inherited the same emotional script. And Mason. He had lived his life floating on the shoulders of others, never realizing those shoulders were bruised. They were not evil. But they had been careless with her. And now, they were seeing the cost. Because when Lila stepped away, she didn't slam the door. She simply closed it. And now, months later, they were standing outside, knocking gently, hoping time and blood would be enough to open it. But what they didn't understand was this. Lila hadn't just walked away from them. She had walked toward herself. And she wasn't about to go back. She didn't respond to the message that day. Or the next. She let it sit there, not as a wound, but as a reminder. That she had changed. That her silence now was not withdrawal, but wisdom. That her boundaries were not walls, but gates with locks she controlled. And she chose peace. A week later, she wrote one final blog post under the invisible pillar. It was called "The House That I Left Standing." They asked me to come back. But I am not a missing piece of someone else's broken puzzle. I am the architect of my own life now. They say they miss me. I believe them. But I do not miss who I had to be to stay. There is love here still, in memory, in possibility, but it lives behind glass. And I have stepped outside. I built something new. Not perfect. Not grand. But mine. And I will not abandon it, not even for an apology. She hit publish. Closed her laptop. Stood up. And opened her window to the late afternoon breeze. The air smelled of mint. Lila never replied to her father's message. Not because she was cruel. But because she had, at last, learned that love without respect is just captivity dressed in nostalgia. And freedom, once claimed, is not something you walk away from. Not even for the people who taught you to disappear.
They lied. They cheated. They betrayed the one person who gave them everything. But guess what? The truth always finds a voice, and here, it screams. If you live for chaos, loyalty gone wrong, and revenge served cold. Like this video. Drop a comment. And hit subscribe, because on Family Drama Unleashed, we don't forgive, and we never forget. Tap that bell, because the next betrayal? It's already on its way.